All right, welcome everybody to the first in hopefully a series of tutorial videos that is designed to teach you how to learn to script in both JavaScript and Python utilizing Google Earth Engine. So if you don't know how to code, if you don't know how to script, this is the video for you. And there is a text which accompanies this, which is an open educational resource that will be available here shortly when I'm making this video, but hopefully here in the next month or so, the first volume, which covers JavaScripting, will be available to the public. And the reason I'm making these videos and doing this textbook is because scripting is something everyone can do. And I think when you talk about programming and coding, people tend to get very nervous and worried that it's going to be a difficult task and that it's not something they can actually do or learn. And it turns out that if you've got the right coach and the right resources, you can successfully accomplish this. So there's nothing to be afraid of. It's really designed to be somewhat intuitive, and we could just use a regular Python or JavaScripting interpreter, but Google Earth Engine really is a neat environment to learn this tool. So if you don't know what Google Earth Engine is, it's time to learn what that is. So Google Earth Engine is essentially a supercomputer with a massive catalog. I think even on here it says a multi-petabyte catalog of satellite imagery and geospatial data. So what makes this unique is that it's available for research, it's available for education, and for not only public use but private use for payment. But if you are a student, you can gain access to this without much difficulty. Now I have shortened this screen on here. Drag this down just a little bit. And if you go to earthengine.google.com, you'll see an option to get started here. But before we go there, it's not going to hurt to read through just what the engine is, what it does, and why it was developed. There was a big push by not just Google, but also Microsoft and their Planetary engine to bring this data to the surface and create an environment where it can be studied. The Earth is really effectively studied when we change our perspective, right? So the example I like to give is if I take my phone and I stick it right up to someone's face, you will only capture that portion of that person's face. Now if I step back a few feet, I can get their entire face. If I step back 10 feet, I can get their entire body. And then if I stand on a ladder at the other end of the room, I can capture not just that person, but anybody else that's in that room. So the idea is as we change perspective and we gain views from space and we look at that in relation to other geospatial data or data about our Earth, it can be useful in monitoring conditions and making decisions. So places like Google and Microsoft realize that it's not going to be very good to have a product if we don't really have a planet. So part of the impetus of creating this and making it available is to encourage research. Now we're not going to get that far into this process. You will learn to do basic analysis and basic analyses in Google Earth Engine. But if you want to do much richer analyses, there are lots of resources available, especially from people like Qiusheng Wu from University of Tennessee, and I will try to provide a link for that. So if you are in a place where you already understand coding, you already understand scripting, you know what Google Earth Engine is for, and you're just looking for greater enlightenment, this is probably not the video for you. If you are just starting, this is where you're going to begin. Okay, now that you've got some context, what I want you to do is go to the Get Started here, and you're going to have to sign in. So if you don't have a Google account, you're going to have to create one, and there are a series of questions that you're going to need to answer, and then you have to verify things probably in that account. Please make sure you are using a Google account. If you need to create another one to facilitate this, then by all means do so. Once you are done, to access that, to actually access the engine, you need to type in code.earthengine. You can see I've already got it on here, google.com. Okay, and then you can hit enter, and there's your option to sign in. That'll bring you into the code editor. And that is the Java-based code editor. So I'm going to close out of this tab here, and hopefully you can see what it's going to look like when you start. Now, right now they're doing this annual developer satisfaction survey. Depending on when you watch this video, you may not actually see that. So what we're going to do is just get acquainted with the interface and learn a couple bits and pieces of how to use it. So what we have here on the left-hand side is a box, and you're going to see some things above it. I have that sort of removed because it contains my account information and things like that. So you don't necessarily need that to do this. So in this left-hand box here, these are where you will house your scripts. There are also lots of examples of different types of analyses you can use. And you can search by that. You can also create things like folders to organize your data. And as I tell all my students that I have now, data management is your concern. So make sure you keep good track of where you're putting things. Okay, this main area right here is where you're going to type in your script, and you can see there's a cursor and a number. The numbers are useful because it'll help you identify where where certain calls and functions are located. So if I refer to line 1, I don't have to actually tell you what's on line 1. There are some things on here like getting links and run, which we'll use after we type some things in. On the right hand side, we have several things here. We have an inspector that when we bring data in here and we start querying the things, that will show up in the inspector. The console is where the output of anything we write in the script that is printed will appear. And then we have some tasks that'll show when it's going through the script, especially if these are quite intensive. It tells how far those tasks are going. It also tells if we're exporting data and how close those are to being finished. And down here is something familiar. This is a map, and as of now, the map is centered on the United States. It might be geographic specific, I don't know. But you can move this around. Right now you have a navigate, the little hand on there to pan around the world, and if you zoom out far enough, it just repeats the world over and over and over again in sort of this projection that it's put the world. So you can see it's quite easy to move around on here, and this is something that's familiar. We also have a toggle here on the map. We can go to a satellite view, so I'm going to come back here into the United States, click on satellite, retains the labels, and you can see the satellite view. And this is just a composite view of probably a fairly big mosaic. I don't know of what the dates are. It does say down here 2023, which is right now the current year. So yeah, you can toggle around that. We have some other ways to create some geometry on there, which we'll use later to query certain areas. So it's fairly intuitive, you know, once you kind of know what you're looking at. how to use this, and that's really as far as it needs to be. Now, the next thing that we need to do is actually understand how do we input data in here. How does that look when we start to do things? What does a script actually look like? Okay, so I'm going to start with the very first example, which is the same example that we use in nearly every programming language the first time we try something, and that is the hello world example. I, to be honest, don't know where that came from, but as long as I've been doing this, which has been a long time, that is the first thing that we do. So what we're going to do is we're going to write a script that prints hello world over in the console on this side. So to do that, I'm going to make sure I'm in the area right here to write the script, and on that line 1, I'm going to type in print, and I'm going to open up parentheses. And you notice when I did that, it automatically closes it. And that's a very nice design of this this API, this interface, to sort of complete that for you. Because if you open a parentheses, you have to close it. Okay, so what we've done is we're telling Earth Engine what we need to do. So you might be accustomed, if you're into the geographical information systems world, a very rich user interface. Earth Engine does not really do that, though I still think this is not a bad user interface. But we have to be explicit. We have to tell the computer what we want it to do, right? So the first thing we're going to do is tell it to do something. We're going to tell it to print something. And so this brings into the conversation of syntax, right? So the way we type something. So there's a function somewhere that says if we put in print right here, that's telling us, hey, put something over in the console here. But to do that, I can't just say, well, print hello world, okay, and hit run, because if I try that, oh, that's an unexpected token, okay, on line 1. It's missing something. It needs something, okay? So the syntax, I'm going to delete this, okay, is to type print, right, and then I'm going to open the parentheses, and if I'm printing something that is something I might say that's not a number, right? So numbers, I can just go ahead and type in. For example, if I type print 2 and hit run, you see over here, it printed 2. That wasn't that hard. But if I want to print something that is not a number, okay, so let's say hello world, and I hit run, oh, I get another syntax error. That's not good. I have not provided what it needs. So again, not that you've done anything wrong here, but I need to put that in quotes, just like you would in an English paper when you're quoting somebody. You'd put that in quotes. So if you want the computer to say something, you're going to have to put it in quotes. So now I've got the quotes in there, and you notice it completed it. Pay attention to that, make sure it actually does complete it, and type in hello world. I can do spaces and things like that. And then I'm going to hit run. And now over here in my console, you can see, hey, it said hello world. Now that wasn't too hard. It's also good form in JavaScript to put a semicolon on the end, okay? Just because down the road we might want to use more than one line to do an operation, okay? So that semicolon for us here is a lot like a period at the end of a sentence. It tells the computer, okay, stop, right? Run this, don't go to the next line, you've hit a semicolon, put that out, and then go to the next operation in the script. Okay, so you'll notice when I did that and I hit run, it doesn't change anything. It doesn't do anything. Okay, so nothing too complicated there. If we want to take it a step further, we can store things in variables. Okay, so if you remember to your algebra class, I know for some that's a painful memory, but if you remember in algebra class, we had variables, and variables are letters that have an equivalency to something that we set or something that we define. Okay, for example, we say x equals 2, x equals 3, y equals 4, right? But the idea of a variable is a variable can change, right? The variable is designed to take input from you. So the name of the variable is decided by you, and the input of the variable is decided by you. You're like, oh, what does he mean? Okay, so what I want to do, I'm going to break this down. Now, you know what we've done here. I'm going to break this down into the same thing, but I'm going to do it as a set of variables. Okay, and there's more than one way to do this. Remember, the engine has to be told what to do. So if I want to make a variable, if I want to define a variable, I have to start by using the term var. You notice when I did that went dark black. Okay, that tells the computer I'm going to want a variable. Now I need to give it a name. The name of it should be something that makes sense to you. Doesn't generally contain weird characters, and spaces are, I would say, frowned upon. Okay, so instead of a space, we're going to cheat and use underscores. So I'm going to say, in this idea, I'm going to use the variable first word. Okay, so variable first word. So the name of the variable is first word, and then I'm going to use the equal sign. Because now I've got the name of the variable, I'm going to give it an input. I'm going to tell you what the first word. In this case, okay, it's a word, so remember I've got to use quotes. Okay, so I'm using double quotes. You can use single quotes. Okay, and the first word in hello world is hello. Okay, so I'm going to make sure those quotes are closed. And then remember what we do at the end? Put a semicolon. Okay. Now for the second variable, so I have to tell it again. Variable second underscore word, and you remember is in quotes world. Put a semicolon. Okay, nothing too scary. We've created two variables here, a first word and a second word. Okay, and we've used that semicolon to tell the computer, okay, go to the next line and do that. Now, if I just run that, nothing appears over here in the console, does it? But I didn't get an error, right? That's a useful tool to find if I've created any problems, right? So sort of the search for problems within my script is called debugging, right? Looking for bugs within it. And right now we have 2 lines, but if you're getting an error, things to look for are, first of all, did you put var at the beginning? Did you give it a name that works? No spaces, no weird characters. Did you tell it to equals? And if you're using something that's not a number, did you put it in quotes? Okay. Okay. So you've got these things. You know that that works correctly. You know that they're stored correctly. Now what we really need to do is send that to the console. Okay. So how do we do that? We use print. Okay, and this time, because I'm printing something that's stored as a variable, I don't have to use quotes. I've already put that up here, okay? But right here, I'm going to go ahead and tell it to print the first word. All right, and I'm going to close that parentheses and put a semicolon and hit run. You can see it's printed the first word, which was hello. So now what we need to do is tell it to print the second word. Okay, and I'm just doing that on another line for now. Close my parentheses. And then I'm going to hit run. And now you can see over in my console, hello and world appear on both lines in there. So that works pretty well. Now, let's say we want to do these together. We can actually do that. Right now they're on separate lines in here. So I'm going to erase these last two prints. Okay. And hey, by the way, I can add an extra space in there if I want. That's not going to hurt anything. That just helps me organize things. If there's nothing written on it, the computer bypasses it when it's processing that script, so it's no big deal if you need some space. So now I'm going to separate my variables from the print function. So I'm going to have it print the first word, and then instead of doing another line, I'm going to use a comma, and I can put a space, or I don't have to put a space, but I'm going to put in the second word. So it's up to you if you put a space in between. It really doesn't matter. I think I usually put a space in just because it's a little cleaner looking for me. Put your semicolon on the end and hit the run. Okay, now it's generated that all on one section of this console. It takes a little bit more work if you want this to be on the same line, but really not too much. So if you do want to do that, let's see, let's get right ahead of that. All right, if you do want to do that, so instead of a comma, you can put a plus sign in between. Okay, and if I hit run, you can see it has hello world. It's, of course, put it together. So that's a bit annoying, but you know what? Did the computer do what we wanted it to do, or what we asked it to do, I should say? Yes, it did. It did exactly what we asked it to do. So if we want to put a space in there, we've got a couple options. One is we can just put a space right here after hello and hit the run. And now we've got the space in there. Okay. The other way to do it would be to put a space in quotes down here in the print, but we're not going to worry about that. We're not too concerned about whether or not that's nice and clean. What you should be understanding is how do we put those inputs in. Okay, so that gives you at least a general idea how to create variables and how to print those variables. Variables also can look a little bit different. For example, we can make an array or a list, depending on how you want to call it. Okay, so I'm going to make a variable, and I'm going to call it my favorite things, one word. You could use underscores if you want, and I'm going to make that equal to. And if I'm doing more than one thing in a variable, if I want it in a list or if I want it in an array, then I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to use a bracket, right, a square bracket. Okay, so my favorite things, so I'm going to use a single quote, but it doesn't really matter. You can use doubles, are bagpipes. I'm going to make sure I close that quote, and then I'm going to put a comma. Okay, bazookies, not to be confused with a bazooka. Close the quote, and put a comma, and concertinas. Close that quote. Okay. Don't forget to end that with a semicolon. And again, just for good measure, go ahead and hit the run, and you see nothing appeared in the console, but I didn't get an error. Okay. Now, lists or arrays are viewed a little bit different than we normally would think it. Okay, because it contains more than one item. So if I want to refer to something, I have to tell it which part of these things I want to refer to. If I just say print my favorite things and put a semicolon on the end, and we run it, you can see it's just going to spit out each of the pieces for that. Okay, did what I asked it to do. But let's say I just want one item of that. Let's say I want just for it to print bagpipes. Okay. First of all, computers don't start counting at 1. They start counting at 0. So bagpipes are in the 0 position. Bazookies are in the first position, or the 1 position, and concertinas are in the second position. So if I want to refer to that, all I need to do in the print function here, I'm going to keep my favorite things, but just like above, I'm going to have a set of square brackets, and then I'm going to refer to the one I want. So in this case, I'm going to do 0, because I want it to print bagpipes. Bagpipes are in the 0 position there. So if I hit run, right over here, it did exactly what I wanted. It printed bagpipes. Okay, so if I wanted to print concertinas, I'm going to have it print my favorite things, and I'm going to have it print the second position. Remember, 0, 1, 2. So if we did that right, it will print bagpipes first, and then concertinas. And it did exactly what we expected. Okay. Those are lists or arrays, and they are very useful, and you will see them. Now, once we get past that, we can define objects, okay? And objects contain lots of pieces. Some scripting languages call them dictionaries also. And so if we want to combine things like lists, or single variables, or things like that, we can put those all within one object. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this here. Okay, and I'm going to make a variable for my object. I'm going to call it one cool dude, and that's going to be all one word, and that equals. But in this, instead of what we've done in the past, where we had square brackets or no brackets, we're going to use curly brackets. Okay, and that's just above the square bracket. It's a shift right there. And you notice it didn't give me another one, so I'm going to have to print the other one when I'm done. And normally when we're building these, we put the name of the object first, one cool dude here. We set it equals, and we open that curly bracket, and then on the next line, so we hit enter, and now you see I get the last curly bracket, and it indents me a little bit. It just keeps things organized. Okay, now it doesn't have to be that way. It can be all truncated on the left side or on the right side, or you can add extra spaces. It really doesn't matter as long as the syntax is correct. Okay, so I'm going to do here name. Okay, so that's a name variable. Okay, and the name I'm going to put there is Jeff. Okay, and those are in quotes because it's a word. I'm going to put comma and age. Okay, I could just type it in, couldn't I? But I think I'm going to do something more annoying. Okay, I'm going to use a different function, which is math, and I'm going to do them from the math package or the math library. I'm going to call square root. Okay, so I have to go to that library. I have to go to that package, math, right? So think of it like going to a library. And in that library, there's a book called Square Root. So I pull the square root book out. And within that, I'm going to say, well, I want the square root. I'm going to open up parentheses. I'm going to go to page 2025. Okay, so that's the best way to think about how that is. So I'm actually just taking the square root of 2025. Instead of just typing my age in there, or sorry, Jeff's age in there, all you're going to do is type math to call that library, that package, dot sqrt, and in parentheses 2025. Okay, and it turns out this is really helpful and really important, because when we start actually using Earth Engine, we have to call the Earth Engine, or we have to go to the Earth Engine library or package to find the functions or the tools that we need. Okay, so I'm going to put a comma there. You know what it does. And I'm going to define a few more things. Color. Okay, and I've put an underscore in between those because I don't want it to be spaced. And because this is a word, I have it in quotes. I'm going to put gray, comma. Okay, so right now we've just done these single variables. So we're building this object, this dictionary, right? And we're putting all these pieces in here about one cool dude, right? His name's Jeff. His age is the square root of 2025. His eye color is gray. And then what we can also do is put in an array or a list. So favorite foods. Okay, and I'm using a colon here. And just like before, I'm going to use square brackets to build that list. Open up a quote. Okay, because I'm putting words, sorry. So taters, close that quote, comma, open quote, steak, close quote, and donuts. And then close the quote. Make sure you've got that last bracket on there. And put a comma. And lastly, we'll put weakness with a colon. And because it's a word, copper, it needs to be in quotes. I'm not going to put a comma after that because that's the end of my object or my dictionary. Okay, so like before, remember, the computer's iterating this. It has not found a semicolon yet. So when I get to the end, after the end of that curly bracket, I'm going to put a semicolon there. And just for good measure, I'm going to run to make sure I don't get any errors over here. I want to make sure that I've created this correctly. Now, if you're getting an error, check the names of your variables first to make sure there's no weird spaces, no weird symbols or things like that that might throw it off. Make sure you've got a curly bracket at the beginning and end. Make sure that all your words are in quotes. And make sure you have commas at the end of each line, except the last line. If you're missing any one of those things, so for example, if I take that comma out after gray, and I hit run, I get an unexpected token, but it's not on the right line. It's on the line below it. And that's one thing about these types of these interfaces, is it doesn't always tell you exactly where it is. But what happened is it went to gray, went to the next line, and it's like, whoa, this isn't in quotes, it's not what I expect. So the syntax error is on 5, but really the problem is on line 4. Once I put that comma back in and hit run, we are in good shape. Okay. Now that you've built this, you are ready to pull some information from it. So you've got all the inputs, now we need an output, right? So for example, if I want the name out of one cool dude, I want Jeff, right? Remember, all I'm going to do is use the print function, nothing different there. Open my parentheses just like before, and I'm going to type in the name of the object. In this case, it's one cool dude. Okay, I could leave it at that. It would go through each line. That's fine. But if I want the name, I have to do something a little bit different. I'm going to do a dot or a period name. Okay, and I'm going to finish that off with a semicolon and hit run. And you can see over here in my console, I got what I expected. Okay, no big deal there. If I want something like weakness, print one cool dude, and I'm going to do a dot weakness. I'll close that there, and then I'm going to hit run. And you can see copper. Okay, now let's say I want something out of favorite foods. Guess what? You've already seen this. I bet you already know what you need to do, right? So if you think back of our array before our list, okay, I need to point to the correct object, which is one cool dude, okay? And I know I want favorite foods, and I could probably run that. Let's see what happens. And yeah, I get what I got before, taters, steak, and donuts, right? But let's say I just want donuts. You can see taters takes position 0, steak position 1, donuts position 2. So just like before, I'm going to put those in those square brackets. So I'm just going to define at the end of that in square brackets that 2. And I'm going to hit run. And you can see it's printed name, weakness, and favorite food. Number 2. Okay? So hopefully this gives you a little bit of confidence in your ability to do this. And hopefully it's not terrifying. So if you feel comfortable with this, I would suggest moving on to the next video. Otherwise, practice this. Practice making different variables. Practice making arrays and lists. Practice making objects, dictionaries, things like that. Until you understand how to do it, and make sure you know how to print that out. If you're finding problems, look at the examples and see what you need to do to fix it. When you're ready, we're going to move on to actually doing some things within the map. Down here, we have to understand the syntax, or how we type things, how we put things in before we can really effectively do something in that area below. So if you have any questions, please reach out to me, and I hope you found this useful.